I caught the first one crawling under my fence at 4:43 a.m., dressed in tactical black, wearing night vision goggles, and carrying what looked like a modified clipboard. He wasn't a thief. He wasn't a hunter. He was part of something worse. They called themselves the Ridge Valley Compliance Force. And they thought they were here to fix my land. Now, before you ask, no, I don't live in a suburb. I live on a 100-acre ranch, 45 minutes from the nearest gas station. No HOA. No neighborhood watch. Just goats, rusted tractors, and the kind of peace you fight your whole life to earn. Or so I thought. I spent 12 years overseas dismantling insurgent networks. I know what a slow invasion looks like. It doesn't start with bombs. It starts with paperwork. 3 weeks ago, I got a laminated flyer zip-tied to my gate. Notice of non-compliance, Ridge Valley Standards Board. Never heard of it. 2 days later they showed up, Karen with her clipboard, and 2 guys in khakis pretending they were law enforcement. Told me I was in Phase 1 violation status. Said my fencing wasn't community standard. Said my barn was aesthetic pollution. I laughed. They didn't. So I did what any reasonable man would do. I burned the flyer, posted a no trespassing sign, and rechecked the Claymore lines I hadn't touched since Afghanistan. Because I knew one thing. If they were bold enough to come with clipboards, they'd come back with something worse. And I'd be ready. 2 days after I caught the first trespasser, the next wave came, this time in daylight. A pearl-white SUV, the kind you'd expect to see in a mall parking lot, rolled up my gravel path like it belonged there. Out stepped Karen. Hair sprayed stiff, sunglasses too reflective, clipboard held like a badge. Behind her? 2 men, late 30s, business casual with a hint of wannabe tactical. Matching polos. Matching smirks. Good morning, Karen chirped like she was delivering a basket of muffins. I didn't say a word. I just leaned on my fence post, arms crossed. We're here on behalf of the Ridge Valley Standards Board, she said, holding up the clipboard like it carried legal weight. We're conducting initial compliance reviews for all non-participating properties. Non-participating? I asked. She smiled like a cat that already knew the mouse was cornered. You didn't attend the introductory town forum last quarter, so your property's been marked for provisional integration. Integration, I repeated slowly. Into what? Fantasyland? She laughed politely. Into our pilot community framework. Don't worry, it's fully funded. You'll barely notice the changes. I looked past her at the 2 guys walking the perimeter of my barn, jotting notes and snapping photos with a tablet. One of them pointed at my rain barrel like it was a bomb threat. I walked over, slow and measured. You boys lost? We're just mapping the compliance zones, one replied without looking up. I glanced at their shirts. No badges. No names. Just a printed patch, Ridge Valley Enforcement Unit. Tell you what, I said. You have 10 seconds to get off my land. After that, I assume you're trespassing with intent. Karen stepped in. Sir, we have full authority under Civic Resolution 12B. That's not a real law, I said. That sounds like something printed at the UPS store. Her face tightened. Non-compliance will be noted. You do that. Maybe use permanent marker this time. They left without another word, but not before slipping a new laminated sign under my gate. Zone red, escalation pending. That night, I found another one, stapled to my barn door. Same language. Same insignia. Except this one had something new, a QR code. I scanned it with a burner phone. It led to a polished website, terms, codes, community directives, even a downloadable re-education manual. Page 7 had a section called Handling Defiant Stakeholders. It wasn't just intimidation anymore. It was doctrine. And the worst part? It had funding. Design. Infrastructure. This wasn't Karen playing bossy neighbor. This was an organized rollout. That night, I called Langston, The local sheriff and the only man I trusted within 50 miles. He came by in plain clothes, listened to everything, and said, "You know, someone tried this HOA stunt over in Whisper Creek last year. Didn't end well." I nodded. "This ain't amateur hour, Langston. They've got structure. They're cataloging. And I think I'm their test case." Langston looked out at the barn. "So what are you gonna do?" I stared into the dark. "I'm gonna remind them what happens when you corner a man who's spent a decade learning how to end wars before they start." By the end of the week, they were back, but this time, they wore uniforms. Not real ones. Khaki cargo pants. Black vests. Iron-on patches that read, "Civil Enforcement, Ridge Valley Unit." But it was the earpieces that caught my attention. And the fact they moved like they'd been drilled. Not military. Not cops. But trained. Or rehearsed. They showed up just after dawn, parking half a mile down the road and walking in through the tree line like they didn't want to be seen. One flanked left, the other two split off, circling the property in a staggered sweep formation. I saw all of it from my loft window, sipping bitter coffee and counting footsteps. 7, 12, 17. At 19 paces, one of them tripped the perimeter sensor I buried in the ivy patch. The alert pinged my phone. Zone 3, unauthorized movement. I didn't move. Not yet. The leader held a digital tablet and pointed it toward the barn. They were scanning. Recording. Probably uploading to whatever fake server hosted their compliance manuals. One of the others radioed something in. I couldn't hear it, but I could read the body language, nervous, tight, alert. I stepped outside, boots on gravel, hands visible. They froze. "Morning," I said casually. The leader turned, trying to recover his composure. "Sir, we're conducting a compliance audit for Ridge Valley standards." "No, you're trespassing on federal recorded private land with a tablet full of fairy tales. This is a civil matter," he replied. "We're authorized under the Emergency Civic Protection Act, Section 41. Still not a real law," I said. "But I give you credit for consistency." He didn't flinch. "You're classified as Zone Red Tier 2. That grants us on-foot inspection rights." I smirked. "You're about one trespass away from getting personally reacquainted with a tripwire fence I haven't needed since 2009. He hesitated. Then, like a magician with no more tricks, he reached into his vest and pulled out a piece of paper. It was a map. My property. Outlined. Marked. Red XS, routes. Gate numbers. Secondary entry points. There was a key at the bottom. My house. Alpha target, high resistance. I took a photo of it with my phone, slowly, never breaking eye contact. Then I said, "You're done here." They backed off, but not without one last jab. "Refusal to cooperate will escalate your file." I didn't answer. I just turned and walked back inside. That evening, I pulled out the old satellite phone and called an old friend, Ricky. Retired Marine. Now a contractor. Quiet, efficient, paranoid in all the right ways. He answered on the third ring. "What's wrong?" he asked. "They've started mapping me." "Local cops?" "No. HOA impersonators with a private army feel." He exhaled sharply. "You want cameras or counter-surveillance?" "Both." 3 days later, Ricky showed up with 2 duffel bags, a flatbed of gear, and a grin that meant trouble for someone else. We set up everything. Trail cams and tree lines. Thermal sensors around the perimeter. Light-activated strobes wired to motion triggers. Remote backup battery arrays. And one special system, a directional sound deterrent, something he'd built from scrap military tech. "Just in case they decide to knock with something louder than a clipboard," Ricky said. I nodded, eyes on the tree line. Because something told me. Next time, they wouldn't knock at all. It happened on the 4th morning. No knock. No SUV. No clipboard. Just darkness, and the kind of silence that makes animals stop breathing. My phone buzzed. Zone 2 breach. Movement, 4 units. I was already halfway into my boots. Max, my border collie, stirred by the door but didn't bark. That alone told me everything. He always barked. Always. Unless the danger was serious. I slipped out the back, keeping low to the shadows near the ATV shed. From there, I had full sight lines of the southern field. Through the night mist, for shadows moved in staggered formation, suppressive light discipline, no flashlights. They weren't neighbors. They were trained. Vest-clad, comms wired, earpieces glowing green in the dark. This wasn't HOA cosplay anymore. This was a raid. The leader raised his hand. They froze near my fence line. Then one of them stepped forward with a handheld device, a jammer. That's when I knew this wasn't just another scare tactic. They wanted to blind my security grid. Too bad Ricky thought of that. The second they crossed the buried tripwire between the second and third fence, the entire field went nuclear. Boom. A wave of floodlights ignited from the treetops, programmed to strobe at disorienting intervals. Sirens shrieked, rotating in sync with motion trackers. The directional sound cannon kicked in, low frequency, enough to scramble focus and coordination. One dropped his gear instantly and rolled to the ground, hands over ears. Another stumbled into the chicken coop and got pecked by 13 furious hens and a very territorial rooster named Reggie. I stepped out from the shadows, spotlights flaring behind me like a halo of vengeance. "Gentlemen," I called out calmly, "if this is about my decorative windmill, I'm afraid the appeal period has passed." One of them, sweating under the strobes, pointed a rifle my way, non-standard, not military issue, but real enough to kill. Big mistake. I activated the secondary deterrent, 2 compressed air flashbangs mounted on the porch rail. They fired with a hollow thump-thump, detonating on either side of the intruders. No shrapnel, just pressure, light, and enough sound to melt your equilibrium. They scattered. But not far. Because that's when the sheriff showed up. Langston's cruiser barreled down the gravel path, lights off until the last second. Then, red and blue sirens lit the sky like the 4th of July. He stepped out slow, one hand on his holster, the other holding a megaphone. "Drop the weapons. Hands up. Now." Clipboard guy, yes, even now, he had a clipboard, raised it like a shield. "We're operating under Emergency Clause B9, Property Seizure Protocol." Langston walked up and snatched the clipboard from his hands. He looked at the label, then flipped the pages. "This isn't a warrant," he said. "This is a grocery list with bullet points." The man in the back tried to run. Max growled and gave chase, not to bite, just to corral. Border collies herd like it's a religion. Langston cuffed the last one, then turned to me. "You good?" I nodded. "They weren't here to talk." He held up the clipboard again. "You know what this is?" I shrugged. "Kindling?" Langston smirked, then sobered. "There's more." One of them had a binder. "Inside, your property layout. Power grid. Animal schedules. Even a photo of your bedroom window from outside." My stomach clenched, not with fear, but with fury. "They're not just impersonating enforcement," Langston said. "They're running recon." He paused. One of the men mentioned Phase 2. Whatever that means. I looked out across my property, still glowing under the emergency lights. The windmill spun slowly. The barn was intact. The goats were annoyed. And the land was mine. But I knew what was coming. This wasn't just territorial harassment anymore. This was a coordinated campaign. "Langston," I said. "Yeah? Get ready. Because this was just the opening act." By the next morning, the signs were everywhere. Not on my land, but around it. At the intersection near the feed store, at the old fence post by Miller's Creek, even nailed to a telephone pole right outside Langston Station. "Zone Red Resident, non-compliant. Avoid unsanctioned contact." Each flyer carried a grayscale aerial photo of my ranch, annotated with bold red arrows pointing out violations, fencing irregularities, unauthorized livestock counts, unpermitted barn structure. They even marked my water tower as a non-harmonized vertical feature. The title at the top? Community Protection Notice, Tier 3 Resident. Underneath it, subject has resisted integration protocols. Known to display verbal hostility. Residents are encouraged to limit interaction. Community support withdrawn. And the worst part? It was working. The man who usually delivered diesel for my generator left the tank half filled and didn't make eye contact. The grocery clerk at the co-op rang me up without a word. One of the families who joined my 4th of July barbecue last year posted on the community forum. We stand with order. We stand with progress. Langston called that night. It's a soft freeze-out, he said. They're using social pressure. Making you the problem. They want me isolated, I said. Easy to discredit. Easier to remove. And it gets worse, Langston added. I found out that website they've been using? It's registered under a nonprofit shell, Ridge Valley Community Advancement Initiative. Karen's the director. It wasn't just propaganda anymore. This was a psychological operation, one designed to make me question the ground I walked on. And that's when I realized. They weren't trying to win the land. They were trying to erase the man who stood on it. If you think that comeback was legendary, hit that like button. Let's see how many would have done the same. 2 mornings after the freeze-out began, I found a folder propped up against my door. It wasn't mailed. No return address. No courier. Just sitting there like a silent threat. Manila, sealed with a red sticker labeled Phase 2, Private Compliance Package. Inside were documents. But not like the flyers or laminated jokes Karen used to deliver. These were different. Thicker paper. Federal formatting. Seals I recognized, DOJ, DHS, even one from the Office of Rural Stability, a department that didn't officially exist. I flipped through it page by page. A memo labeled Target Zone Alpha, Resistance Profile, Subject Callahan. Charts tracking. Non-cooperation behavior patterns. A map of my property with infrared overlays. A printed transcript of a phone call I'd had with Langston. Drone footage stills dated 2 weeks ago. And then I saw the kicker. Subject rated as autonomous class. Strategic thinker. High influence among rural populations. Pattern resistant. I sat back, the paper trembling slightly in my grip. I wasn't just on a list. I was the list. Langston arrived within the hour. I didn't call him. He just showed up, like he could feel it. What is it? He asked, stepping inside. I handed him the folder. He didn't speak for 5 minutes. Just read. Slowly. Carefully. His face changed with every page. From concern, to anger, to something I couldn't quite place. Recognition. You've seen this before, I said. He nodded once. Something like it. Years back. We ran drills with FEMA and private contractors. Talked about compliance modeling. Thought it was theory. It was, I replied. I helped write parts of it. That stopped him. What? I stood up, walked to the far cabinet, pulled out an old military binder covered in dust. Inside, copies of old strategy memos, proposals I'd written over a decade ago. Titles like Community Cohesion Through Environmental Structuring and Soft Infrastructure as a Vector of Control. I laid them next to the folder. Same format. Same phrases. Same diagrams. They took our theories, I said, and ran field trials. Langston exhaled sharply. And Ridge Valley's the testbed. I pointed to a page in the folder. It was a table. Phase 1, Integration. Phase 2, Pressure. Phase 3, Correction. Phase 4, Erasure. My name was listed under Phase 2. 3 other properties were already marked Phase 3. 2 of those I recognized, neighbors who'd sold suddenly. No reason. No goodbye. Just gone. Langston leaned on the table. Karen's not in charge. No, I said. Karen's a puppet. A field coordinator. Her flyers, her patrols, her fake HOA, those are just tools. He pointed at the header. Rural Behavioral Management Program, OPRM. Is that what I think it is? I nodded. Operational Rural Management. It was decommissioned years ago, officially. And unofficially? I guess we're looking at the pilot reboot. Langston rubbed his temples. Jesus. I looked out the window. The barn stood tall. Max lay on the porch. The land was still mine, for now. But I could feel it shifting. Like the ground knew someone was trying to replace the roots. They're not coming for my land, I said. They're coming for me. And when they're done, they'll move to the next name on the list. Langston looked at me hard. What do you want to do? I didn't blink. I want to break the algorithm. They came at 3:58 a.m. No headlights. No engine sounds. Just 3 silhouettes, creeping across the southern ridge, using the tree line for cover. The motion sensors picked them up before Max even stirred. Zone 4 breach. Multiple contacts. Armed. I didn't panic. I moved. Coffee still warm on the counter, I slid into the coat with the embedded trigger in the sleeve and made my way to the eastern blind. The thermal cam confirmed 3 bodies, tight formation, 2 carrying rifles. The third held something square. Clipboard. Because of course he did. But this wasn't like before. These weren't neighborhood watch wannabes or HOA mall cops. These were geared, tactical boots, clean grips, disciplined movement. And the rifles, real this time. Military grade. Slung tight. Clipboard guy raised a hand. The others stopped near my porch gate. I watched through the scope, breath held. Then he spoke, low but clear. You have failed to comply with behavioral recalibration protocols. This property is subject to emergency seizure under Clause B9, subsection D. I stepped onto the porch. You quote one more fake law, I said, and I'll cite you under subsection go to hell. No laugh. No flinch. You are designated a primary resistance node, he said. Your property and assets are now forfeit. The guy on the right adjusted his rifle, too tense, too jumpy. And that's when I knew. They weren't law. They weren't military. They were believers. Recruited, trained, and sent to erase me. So I triggered it. With a subtle squeeze of my wrist, the silent defense system came alive. Steel barricades hissed up from the ground, sealing off the driveway. Motion sensors activated flood strobes, not steady lights, but blinding, disorienting pulses in red and white. The kind used in non-lethal crowd control. Clipboard guy shielded his eyes. Twitchy rifle guy swung wide and raised his weapon. Big mistake. From the eaves of the barn, 2 flashbangs launched on a timer, detonating in perfect sync. Sound, light, pressure. No shrapnel, just chaos. They dropped. Screaming. Scrambling. And that's when I moved. I darted low across the gravel, took cover behind the old trough, and hit the second trigger. Directional sirens howled from 4 corners of the property, each pitched at a slightly different frequency, designed to confuse and collapse directional awareness. Twitchy guy fired a shot, wild, harmless, then dropped his rifle and started crawling. Clipboard stumbled toward the fence line, shouting commands into a dead radio. Too late. Langston's cruiser crested the hill with backup right behind him. He didn't even wait for a full stop before stepping out, sidearm drawn. Down! Weapons down! Hands where I can see them! Clipboard hesitated, tried to raise a file folder, yes, a folder, in defense. Langston fired into the dirt at his feet. The folder dropped. The man froze. Within 60 seconds, it was over. 6 of them total. 3 more emerged from the woods after realizing their plan had failed. Langston's deputies moved fast, zip ties and tactical commands snapping through the air. One of the men, the quiet one, looked directly at me as they loaded him into the squad car. He smiled. Calm. Like this was all still part of the plan. You think this ends here? He said. You think this was about land? I said nothing. He leaned closer to the bars. This is about disruption. You're not the enemy. You're the prototype. And then he winked. Langston turned to me. You okay? I nodded. I'm still standing. He handed me a patch they pulled off one of the vests. Phase 4 certified, Enforcement Unit 7. Langston frowned. That means there's at least 6 more. I looked back at my house, still lit, still solid. They sent 7, I said. And it still wasn't enough. The drive was unlabeled, just my name scrawled in block letters with a black marker. Callahan. Langston found it in Clipboard Guy's vest, zipped in a hidden pocket. The others had burner phones, comms gear, fake IDs. But this was personal. We cracked it that night. Inside were 4 folders. Phase 1, Infiltration. Phase 2, Conditioning. Phase 3, Pressure. Phase 4, Correction. The documents were exhaustive: satellite photos, microphone logs, behavioral predictions. They tracked my routines down to how often I forgot to close the barn gate. But the final file hit hardest. A video. Karen. Not ranting. Not smug. Calm. Controlled. Speaking like a spokesperson in a corporate training module. If you're watching this, she said, then the system has reached friction. That's not failure, it's success. Disruption identifies weakness. It tests scalability. She smiled faintly. Callahan, you weren't the problem. You were the proving ground. Then the screen went dark. I didn't speak for a long time. Langston looked at me. What now? I publish. Would you have gone public like Callahan? Type yes in the comments if you would have done the same. And I did. Every file. Every video. Every memo. I filed a federal whistleblower complaint, scrubbed the data for civilian names, then dumped the whole system onto a secure site and sent it to every journalist, watchdog, and oversight office I could find. The story exploded. Congressional hearings were opened. The Ridge Valley Compliance Program was officially decommissioned, again. Karen was indicted on federal conspiracy charges. Her nonprofit's license was revoked. Former contractors came forward. More drives were found in other states. But even as the noise died down, I knew better. One final email surfaced, buried deep inside the drive. Encrypted. Timestamped after the raid. Just one line. Reassignment approved, Pilot Zone, Midwest Beta. A new name. A new place. A new test. Because it was never just about me. It was about control. Pattern disruption. Replication. They thought I was the variable. They were wrong. I was the firewall. And I'm still standing. If this story hit you deep, share it with someone who still believes in standing for what's right. New stories drop every day. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next time the system tries to erase someone who won't fold. This story isn't just about land, it's about liberty. At its core, it reminds us that true freedom isn't given, it's defended. The quiet peace we earn through years of hard work can vanish overnight if we stop paying attention. Control doesn't always come with guns or badges. Sometimes, it arrives with clipboards, subtle laws, and neighbors who stop waving. Callahan's fight shows that standing firm in the face of manipulation isn't about being stubborn. It's about knowing your rights, trusting your instincts, and refusing to be silenced. In a world where truth is increasingly buried under layers of red tape and bureaucracy, this story urges us to stay vigilant. It also reminds us that community matters, not just the one on paper, but the real people around us. And when that community turns against you, sometimes you have to stand alone to remind them what right looks like. Freedom isn't fragile, but it needs defenders. Be one.